Good morning, Rabbi.
We learn in Mishna Yevamos, Perek Getvach Shvatov, Perek Tesvav, chapter 15, Mishna Ches, Mishna 8. Okay. Ha'isha shahalcha hi u'ba'adam dinas hayam. A woman went, she and her husband, to Medinas Hayam, to a foreign land, u'bena imahem, and her son was with them, meaning they went with a child. Okay. Now, when they left from where they were, was there any kind of yibum issue? Was there any any kind of status on her part of needing yibum in any way? The answer is no. Right? At that point of time, there's a child, and therefore her status for yibum is that she is going to be, so to speak, yibum free. Uba, and then she came back. Va'amra, and she said, "Mei Spiley, my husband died. V'achar kach mei spini, and after that, my son died." So what she's saying is that, number one, my husband's dead, right, which we've been discussing until now. And number two, she's saying that my son died afterwards. The ramifications of that are that there is no need for yibum, because as long as when he dies, he has a child, then there's no yibum. However, were the child to die first and then him, then that means that she does need yibum. So she's saying, I don't need yibum. There's no yibum bond here at all, because my son died after my husband did. Says the Mishna Nemenis. She is believed to say so. Now let's step back for a second and examine this. She says my husband died. As we have been learning now, ready for a couple of days, she's believed to say that. Okay. But now regarding to saying when her son died, we don't necessarily have any basis or any kind of law to say that she can, walk up and say, hey, my son died, but he died after my husband. There's no specific belief given to her for that. So when she goes ahead and she says, my son died, right, but he died after my husband, she's kind of opened a can of worms. She's opened up the thing, her son died. Now, she says that he died after the husband, but maybe he died really before the husband. And that means she does need yibum. So who says she should be believed? But the answer is that there is a principle called Pesha Asar, Pesha Hitter. Basically, if you bring up the possibility of Isser, of prohibition, when you didn't need to, and you still brought it up, then you're believed to what you're saying. And therefore, in this case, if she would have come back and she would have said, my husband died, that's all she would have said. All she would have said, my husband died. Would she need yibum? No. Why? Because when she left, she had a son, right? And when she left, her son was alive. We have no basis to say he's not alive. And therefore, if she were just to come back and say, my husband is dead, she could be free to marry and there'd be no yibum issues whatsoever. Now she basically starts opening up, like I said, a can of worms. She starts creating the possibility of prohibition by saying, my son died. Oh, your son died, right? Maybe you need yibum. But she says, no, he died after my husband, and therefore I don't need yibum. So being that she's the one who, she didn't need to bring up anything about her son, right? Meaning if she wasn't telling the truth about her son, she didn't have to say anything. She would have been able, if she wasn't telling the truth about the fact that she doesn't need yibum, then she could have said nothing. She could have just said, my husband died, finished. And at that point of time, we would have said she's believed to remarry, and there'd be no one would say there's a consideration of yibum. The fact that she brought up the consideration for yibum, but then she says, but there isn't an issue of yibum because he died afterwards, we believe her. Because being that she's the one who created the whole question, therefore we believe her to say that the question is not a question. It's similar, or maybe actually, what we call a migu. If you were lying, you could have done something better than what you did now. If she was lying about the yibum issue, she didn't have to say anything, and she would have gotten away with it. The fact that now she created some kind of a question says, well, if she wasn't telling the truth, she didn't have to say anything, and therefore we believe her. So basically, in the case where her status when she left us was that she had a son, there was no status for Yibam at all. So now, when she's not contradicting that, she's actually working with that, she can be believed. That's what's happening here. Now we have the next case. May Spini. She says, okay, the same story. She left with her husband and her child. And then she comes back and she says, Meis B'ni, my son died, v'achar kakach meis baili, and afterwards my husband died. So what is she saying? She's saying, I need Yibam. Yeah. That's what she's saying. The part of meis baili, my husband died, okay, that's something she's believed on. But she's now saying, but my son died first. That means she's trying to change the status from before. The status she left with was a status that she doesn't need Yibam. She's trying to say now, I do need Yibam. Says the Mishna in an emeris. She's not believed to say that. You can't do a Yibam based on what she's saying. She's not believed for that. And there's no, and actually, she's going against her established status from before. She's going against what we call her chazaka. She's going against her previous established status. The previous status was she doesn't need Yibam, and she's trying to change it and say she does need Yibam. She's not believed for that. All right. She's not believed for that, right? And therefore there is no Yibam. But she's believed to say her husband died, right? So can she go ahead and get remarried now? The answer is no. Well, we still have to take into consideration what she says. Yeah. We're not going to just completely ignore what she says when she says, my son died first. She's not believed to allow a Yibam, which could potentially be a very serious prohibition if there is no Yibam. But at the same time, we can't just let her go ahead and get married without anything because we have to take into consideration what she says. Maybe it's true. And maybe she does need Yibam. And therefore, at the end, she'll have to have chalitza, but no Yibam. No Yibam because we can't believe her that her son died first. But at the same time, she can't get away with she can't go scot-free because maybe what she said is true. And therefore, if she wants to marry someone else, if she wants to remarry, she's going to need chalitza to be able to do so. Okay. It is forbidden to say rechilas. Again, rechilas being where you're telling someone about what someone else said or did to them. Even if it is absolutely true, there is no falsehood involved in what's being said. Still, you can't say it. And even not in front of the person who you are basically saying did something wrong to the other person. And even if you know that you'd be ready to say this even in front of that person's face, you'd be ready to say in front of him, you said this or did this about so, or said this about so and so. It doesn't help for you to say, well, I would say this even in front of him, which means it's really true. It doesn't necessarily help. It's still going to be forbidden. It's still rechilas. Mamish. And even if, let's say, the person is brazen enough to actually say in front of the person to his face, you said this about him, or you did this and this to him. You've got all three people are there. You are cute. You're saying to the person, you did this to Shimon, and Shimon is right there. The usher. Of course, it's forbidden. Again, it doesn't make what you're saying any better or any more true. And it can be absolutely true, but it doesn't make a difference. And your sin is even greater than usual. Why? So number one, you're going to actually, again, let's say Reuben tells Shimon what Levi said to him. And he does it in front of Levi's face, in front of Shimon. Okay, so Shimon is going to not only be, Shimon is really going to be upset now about Levi because he's going to really accept it as the truth because look, Reuben is saying it in front of his face and in front of me. So that's even going to create a greater animosity if it wasn't done in this manner. And also, in the fact that you now do it in front of all three people, that increases the potential of the number of different prohibitions and positive commandments that be transgressed when doing so. That is in his introduction. The Chofetz Chaim shows how when a person speaks, there's not only the actual sin for it itself, but all the other sins that could come about with it. And when you're going ahead and doing this in front of everyone, the chances for increasing the number of sins becomes even greater. And therefore, doing the rechilas in this manner is even worse than just basically saying it behind his back. Have a wonderful day. A good tavach. Shavua tov.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.